Next up, we have LeAnn Whitney, an associate professor of oceanography at Maine Maritime Academy. LeAnn describes herself as a phytoplankton molecular ecologist, or, according to her daughter, a phytoplankton nerd. I have that phytoplankton nerd. I am clearly not it.
They'll hear it a lot.
Okay, great. You guys paid more attention to LeAnn. She didn't always know she'd be a scientist when she grew up. She grew up in Machias, Maine, where summers meant raking blueberries and swimming in local lakes with her 5 older siblings. She and her siblings are first-generation college students. LeAnn, her path towards marine science began when she partnered in the Keller-Bloom program at Bigelow Laboratory for Ocean Sciences as a junior in high school. So really good emphasis on exposure to things makes you rethink, well, gosh, what could I be a nerd in? This sounds great. And that experience introduced her to the hidden world of plankton and the possibility of studying the ocean for a living. She went on to earn a BS in marine biology from the University of Maine. She received her PhD in cell and molecular biology from the University of Rhode Island. And in 2013, she saw the light and came back to Maine as a postdoctoral researcher at Bigelow Laboratory for Ocean Sciences, where she became a research scientist, a position she held until 2024. But in 2018, she joined Maine Maritime Academy. This is not working for me. She is excited to share her love of phytoplankton with you. Yes?
Yep.
All right, great. And hopes that a few of you might also leave as nerds in this area as well. Her favorite science-themed pop culture item is the podcast Radio Lab, and not just Radio Lab, even better, 2 episode recommendations, Juicervos and Octomom. So look those up.
Just listen. They're great. Yeah. All right, go. Thank you for the invitation to come and talk about phytoplankton. The ocean is full of these microscopic organisms, and despite being really small, they help run the planet. So imagine looking at a strand of your hair straight on. That's really hard to see. Now divide that by 10. That is the average size of the phytoplankton cells shown here. So if they're invisible, why am I showing you a map of the global ocean? This is actually a map of phytoplankton abundance. And it's because they're abundant and photosynthetic, we can actually detect their chlorophyll from space. And again, because they're abundant and photosynthetic, they're important to life on Earth. And so we phytoplankton nerds, I'll put Julie in that category as well, we like to say that about every other breath we take uses oxygen produced by marine phytoplankton. So they're really important. This map also shows us that they're not evenly distributed. So like plants on land, phytoplankton need sunlight and nutrients, and those aren't the same everywhere. The ocean is a constantly changing environment. And so understanding, despite all that variability, phytoplankton survive. So understanding how phytoplankton survive in a changing ocean is the focus of my research. And me, I'm rooting for the underdogs. I'm really interested in the phytoplankton that live in these dark blue regions. Here, phytoplankton abundance is low because nutrients like phosphorus are scarce. When preferred forms of nutrients run out, phytoplankton will switch and they'll start using alternative forms of nutrients. And so I like to think of it like this. Preferred nutrients are like getting your electricity from the power grid. It's easy and efficient. When that runs out, phytoplankton will use alternative forms, and that's like a backup generator. It works, but it costs more energy. And so I'm interested in how phytoplankton, or what alternative forms of phosphorus phytoplankton can use. And so to do this, we grow phytoplankton in the lab and challenge them with alternative forms of phosphorus to see if they can grow. And when I say we, I mean it's a team effort, as it always is. And so in the lab, we set up an experiment with 3 conditions. One, where cells are given high phosphorus, the preferred form, that will be in blue. In orange is low amounts of phosphorus. That's like giving them no power. And then the high alternative phosphorus is like our backup generator example, and that'll be shown in purple. And then we follow their abundance over time. And so here's what we saw when we did that experiment. So we see that cells given the alternative phosphorus grew, not as well as the high one, but better than the low treatment. This was really exciting. Before we did this, we didn't know that phytoplankton could use this alternative phosphorus at all. And then when we tested this in other species, we found something even more interesting, which is that some phytoplankton can do this and some can't. So our next research question became, how are they able to do this? And to do that, we turned to molecular biology. And so all cells have DNA, RNA, and protein. DNA is the instruction manual for the cell, and proteins are doing the work. The RNA is this middleman that is telling the cells what instructions to actively use. And so you can measure RNA to see which genes are being turned on, or as we like to say, which genes are being expressed. And so in our study, we wanted to know what genes are being turned on in the cells growing in that alternative phosphorus. So in other words, what we really want to do is start to uncover the hidden molecular tools phytoplankton are using to survive in a low nutrient ocean. And so here's an example. I'm calling it a mystery gene. So in this mystery gene, it is highly expressed in our alternative phosphorus treatment compared to the other two. We don't know what it does, but it's clearly very important. And we can do this for every gene in the genome. And believe it or not, this phytoplankton has 30,000 genes. That's more than humans. And so the takeaway is this. Phytoplankton, while microscopic, they are complex and resourceful, and we still have a lot to learn about them. And in my 10 seconds, I'm going to tell you why it's important. These big blue regions here with low nutrients, they're expanding as the ocean warms. So understanding how phytoplankton survive in this low nutrient ocean is important. Did it. Yeah.
Are you able to create predictive models of where things will move, and how do wars, say in Ukraine and the Middle East, affect all of that?
Oh, wow. So how things move being like how phytoplankton will move? Yeah, so phyto means like light, right? And planktos means move. So they're actually going to move with the currents. So they are at the mercy of the currents. So you can predict, in the sense, physical oceanographers can predict where the currents will move, and the phytoplankton will go with them. And how are the wars going to impact them? That is a question that I would never have prepared for or thought about. Oh wow! In a tangential way, I guess I would say anything that's being produced in the atmosphere or in the ground is going to make its way into the ocean. And so any of those chemicals or pollutants could impact the phytoplankton growth. That is a weak answer, but that's the one you get to think, you know? Okay, got it.
I was curious about, I've heard about the flipping of some of those ocean currents, and do you know anything about sort of like how that's affecting the phytoplankton?
Yeah, so when a current flips, or oftentimes I think about it when it weakens, that's actually really important for this process. So when a water column becomes really stable, that's actually means that the surface is going to get really warm, and then the deep water is going to stay cold and stay there. And so that's actually what's going to supply those preferred nutrients up to the phytoplankton. And so if that doesn't happen, that's when the cells need to really rely on those alternative forms. And that's sort of the process that I'm really kind of interested in.
Does reliance on those low nutrient forms affect the output of oxygen?
Yeah, it does. I would think about it more in the sense of like, who are actually going to be the phytoplankton that are more likely to use those alternative forms? And they are typically smaller cells, and not growing as rapidly. And so that actually means there's just going to be less of that. Yeah.
Do you know much about the bioluminescing phosphorescence there in Castine at the Maine Maritime Academy?
Oh my gosh, that is such a timely question. The answer, I recently went to a meeting in Scotland, and this very conversation came up about Castine. So the answer is, and I didn't know this, that no one actually knows what the bioluminescent organism is. So it is on my to-do list this summer is to tow and look for phytoplankton. And I hope I'm not giving anything away to the person who's doing this, but they actually think maybe it's a zooplankton and not a phytoplankton. So next year, ask me that, and maybe we'll have an answer to that question. That's funny. It's very timely.
It's hard. Do you know if this picture where the northern hemisphere has much more phytoplankton in the south, has this always been the case? Do we know, or is it changing? Did the southern hemisphere used to have more, or?
Yeah, so this is a month snapshot. So this is May. So this is essentially, right, like spring in the northern hemisphere and fall in the southern hemisphere. So it's all driven by light and nutrients. So less light down here right now and more light up here. And if you go to the NASA website, this is actually motion. So you can see over years and over months the seasonality associated with it. Mm-hmm.
I heard you talking about different kinds of phosphorus. Is it like different compounds that contain phosphorus or one of the two types of pure phosphorus?
So the phosphorus that I'm talking about, I don't know about those forms you're talking about, but like this is inorganic versus organic phosphorus. So phytoplankton actually prefer an organic form, and then when that runs out, they'll turn on to these organic forms. And actually, the one that I'm calling alternative, the one I'm really interested in this study, is a form of phosphorus. A flavor of it is found in Roundup, which is glyphosate, and so you might have heard of that in some pesticides. They're sort of natural forms of that, and those are really the ones that I'm interested in.
Get off while you can.
Okay, I'll run. Great.
That was outstanding. Thank you.